Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño and today we're going to ask ourselves, is the camera we're using deciding the type of photos we take? This video stems from a question that comes up many times in my mind. When I'm teaching a class, many of the people I teach are beginners. But some are intermediate and they have a notion that they can or can't do certain types of photography because of the camera they have. So let's get into that. There are ways to define what type of photographs the camera we use can take. There's a definite, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a definite description of topics or definition of topics that we can take with a particular camera that we can't do with another camera. So to some degree, the camera does decide, but I think many times we let that get too far ahead of us and we let it decide everything that it does or everything that we can do. Our camera is a tool and it's no different than a hammer or a screwdriver, really. Let me explain. Take a watch, for example, right? A watch has very, very tiny screws in it. No different than, for example, a camera lens. The screws are so tiny, sometimes you can't see the head. And when you find a screwdriver that works for something like a watch, it's not going to help you take an engine apart from an automobile or a motorcycle, for example. I mean, I don't think anybody will dispute that, right? A camera is no different, right? So let's just pick a random camera, right? There's so many really good cameras that do different things. Canon R3, for example, right? The Canon R3 has burst rates of like 190 frames per second, some ridiculous, ungodly number that other camera manufacturers are starting to implement. And the whole purpose of that is because the camera is made for sports, for very, 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 very high-end sports, right? Things that are happening very quickly, and if you're in that world, you want to capture every second. You want to capture that ball just leaving the pitcher's, hand, right? And for that, you're going to have to take a whole bunch of frames per second. So how do they do that? Well, they bring the megapixel count way down. So it's 20 or 24 megapixels. Now you say, okay, well, so it shoots really fast. What are my limitations? Well, with 24 megapixels, I can't do a huge enlargement. Right? You're going to need 100, 150 megapixels for that, for billboards and, high-end exotic cars, bags. I mean, those companies pay camera photographers that hold cameras north of 100 megapixels because they know that these pictures are going to look super sharp when they enlarge them, right? So that's a limitation of the R3. What else can the R3, maybe for detailed shots, right? You are looking at even something like an 8x10, but you want ultra high detail. Well, a 24 megapixel sensor isn't going to be as good as a 50, 60, 80, 100 megapixel sensor, right? So croppability, right? You want to crop something. You know you don't want to carry a telephoto lens, so you're going to use cropping. 100, 150 megapixel camera can take a wide shot, and then you can come home and you can crop it a quarter of the size, right? With the 24 megapixel sensor, you're going to be very limited. So we start to see that, yes, it's true. The camera we're using can limit or to help us decide kind of what pictures we can and can't take. The flip side to that is the high end, right? 100, 150 megapixel camera. What can it do well? Well, obviously enlargements, detailed, croppability, all that is fantastic. What it's not going to be so good at is, you look at the Fuji, which is 100 megapixels, the GFX system, 5 frames per second for the camera I have. I think it went up to 7 or 8 frames per second now, right? It's a little faster because of the sensor is capturing so much information. It can't process it that quickly. So we're limited if you want to do high-end sports, right? Tracking faces, that stuff is slower for these cameras. And if you get into the 150 megapixel sensors, which are like the Phase 1 or the Hasselblads, some of them don't even do, multiple frames per second. They don't follow faces, they don't track faces. Some of them are not even autofocus. So limitations are there. I don't think there's any argument to what we're saying here. I just wanted to get that out of the way because cameras do decide to a certain degree, right? But most of us don't have those really one-off cameras that are meant to do specific work. For the most part, probably 90% of the cameras in the world do, just about everything relatively well. So what this video is really addressing is not the limiting tools, right? The fact that we have tools that limit us. It's a limiting mindset. And this is what we're going to dive into. What do I mean by that, right? I wrote a couple of things down here. Well, limiting a 16 megapixel sensor or camera to casual photography only, right? If you look at 16 megapixel, well, I always point to this photograph that's hanging up there, which you can't see because it's blurred out, taken with a 6 megapixel sensor, my Canon 10D, right? One of the first really good Canon digital cameras that came out. And it was a crop sensor, and it was 6 megapixels. And that's a 24 by 36, and I enlarged a 40 by 60 canvas and sold it at an art gallery, right? For a lot of money of that print. So it can be done. You have to know how to do it, right? The light has to be good, and you have to know what you're doing in post-processing. Today, with sharpening and all this AI stuff, it's even easier. So what used to happen is we went from 6 megapixels to 12 megapixels. We got to 16 megapixels. People were doing weddings and sports, and nobody had issues. But today, for some reason, you grab a 16 megapixel camera and everybody has a beef with it, right? Everybody has to say, this is not good enough for weddings. This is not good enough for product photography. Why? Why? It was fantastic for many, many years. So limiting a 16 megapixel camera to casual photography and not using it for street photography, weddings, black and white, products, right? That's a limiting mindset. Limiting an 85 millimeter lens to portraits. Oh, the 85 is so sweet for portraits, and a 1.2 will blur out the background. If you follow Andy Mumford, I'll put his YouTube channel down below. I love him as a photographer. He does a lot of landscapes. Used Canon for a while, I think maybe even Nikon, but now he's using Fuji. And he uses 85, 100, even 200 millimeter lenses for his landscapes. And you have to see what he does. It's beautiful work. So he broke that mindset, right? That 24 millimeter lens or 35 millimeter lens is good for landscapes. He did, of course he still does that, but he uses 50, he uses 85, he uses 100 and 200, right? Because you can do different things with landscapes when you use those lenses, right? You compress differently than a wide angle lens. Limiting a 100 megapixel camera to landscapes and portraits, for example, or products, when you can do mild sports, you can do all kinds, you can take it into the street. My GFX 100S, yeah, it's a little bigger than maybe an R5, just a little bigger and a little heavier. But if I put the smallest lens I can get for that camera on it, I can walk the streets of New York City taking 100 megapixel images if that's what I want, right? Nothing is stopping me because it is a 100 megapixel camera and it only does 5 frames per second and it doesn't track faces that well. Who cares? It's street photography. You focus across the street, you put it on f8, f11, and everything is sharp, right? It doesn't matter. You put it at 250th of a second, and it does what any camera does at 250th of a second. So we limit ourselves terribly because of things we've heard. We're limiting ourselves because of preconceived notions of things we've heard or read about the camera we hold. Some people heard, they were told, they read, it doesn't matter where they got it, that the camera they bought for the class that they took with me is a great entry-level camera and really good for picnics. And that's about it. I wouldn't use it for anything else. So what do? They use it for picnics, and they would never, ever, ever use it for something like a family event, a serious event. And they have a powerful 15 megapixel camera that was heaven when it came out. And because today cameras are 24 megapixel, 32 megapixel, 40 megapixel, 45, 60, 80, 100, they feel like they have something that's been left behind, right? And they've been told it's a great, camera for little things like family picnics, and that's all they use it for. And now they're saving for a camera that they can shoot at an indoor event. And they have a camera that can do that more than well. or somebody hears that their camera is terrible for landscapes. They watch a review, the person doing the review is comparing 5 cameras, and the camera they have came in last, right? So, for landscapes. So they say, well, there are 4 other cameras that are better for landscapes, so it must be that this camera is not good for landscapes. Again, the camera was breathtakingly good when it came out, right? Other cameras have come out around it, maybe even during the same time. They all do something a little different. Some have more lenses that you can buy for them. So the photographer may have preferred it because it has more lens options. Maybe it had a few more megapixel options for the other cameras, whatever. But the camera is still amazing for landscapes. But because of what the person heard, read, or whatever, they're stuck thinking that they can't take this camera on a trip. So what do? They take their phone on the trip. And their phone captures even crappier pictures than that camera. It's amazing, right? But this is the way that we're programmed, and it's unfortunate. Think about the camera you own and ask yourself, how am I limiting myself to the photography that I'm taking? Am I focused in one area because of this camera? Am I shying away from certain things because of this camera? This is what we need to ask ourselves. If you want to grow as a photographer this year, 2025, or whenever you watch this video, use your camera in ways that you have never, ever used it before. Challenge yourself and challenge the camera. Take it out there and do things that you've never done before. Give yourself assignments that maybe wouldn't have occurred to you, right? Maybe you've never done street photography. I want to go into the city this weekend and I want to grab my camera and I want to do street photography. You've never done flowers. You've never done macro. Grab the closest lens you have to a macro. Maybe get an extension tube for 25, 30 bucks used. Put it on and then add your lens. An extension tube is something you put between your camera and your lens. It goes in the middle. And what it does is it gives you the ability to get closer up. So get an extension tube for 20, 25 bucks used. Put your lens on top of that and then go shoot flowers. Do something you've never done. That's my parrot. She's happy. That's really all I wanted to say for this video. I don't want to dwell, I don't want to spend too much time. It's not a complicated concept, right? Many of the things we talk about on this channel are pushing the limits of our gear, pushing the limits of our mind, right? Pushing our lenses. And that's what it's about. That's how we grow. Don't be so quick to believe everything you're told. Whether it's photography, whether it's religion, whether it's whatever it is, don't be so quick to swallow the crap that people feed you, right? That's not how you want to live. Question everything. It's your right. It's your birthright. Question everything that you're fed, right? And when somebody tells you your camera is good for something, not good for another, let me tell you the next step. Take your camera everywhere. This is the second thing, right, as a summary. The first one was don't believe everything you're told. The second one is a follow-up to that one, which is take your camera everywhere. Challenge yourself. Do things that you've never done. Do things that other people say the camera is not good for. The only way to find out the limitations of your camera is to do different things with it, right? Take it to the gardens, take it to the city, take it to landscapes, do portraits, do sports, do children, do pets, do a little of everything. And you're going to start to see like, ooh, you know what? The colors of this camera are very cold. Maybe it's not great for portraits. Yeah, I can play with it in post-processing on the computer, but not the best for portraits. Maybe the megapixels are too high and I'm getting too much detail on the face, right? That's a thing, by the way. People soften lenses with a filter because there's too much clarity and they're seeing hair follicles in the portraits. Not good. So find out what your camera is good for. Find out what it's not so great for. And only then can you decide if you need another camera or if you're going to shy away from doing that type of photography with your camera, or if you're going to focus on a specific type of photography with your camera. It's the only way to decide. Number 3, as a summary, be careful with the pros, the so-called pros, because they too have opinions, they take sides, and they have limiting beliefs. And if that's all not bad enough, many of them are paid to have an opinion. So they're going to guide you in a certain direction because Canon or Nikon or Fuji or Sony pays them, whether they send them a camera or lenses, right? So you need to be careful. Be careful with the pros. When you're watching a review, make sure it's a an objective review, right? Many of them are. I watch a ton of good reviews, and I won't just watch one. If I'm going to buy a lens, I typically end up watching between 5 and 10 reviews on it. And you might think it's too much, but I want to know exactly what I'm getting into when I buy that lens, right? And how it compares to other lenses. So that's really it for the summary, right? At the end of the day, you are the only one that can make the decision about what your camera is good for and what it's not so good for. So take it out, take plenty of pictures, and decide for yourself. Please like and subscribe. It takes the channel a long way. I love you guys for that. Put some comments down below. Let me know if you think some of this doesn't make sense, if you agree, if you've found this to be true, in your own world of photography. And there's a link to buy me a coffee. That's going to get me to rent some gear that I can do reviews for. Sometimes I drink the coffee. Sometimes I'll, put the money together and get something to do a review on. So either way, I hope this was useful, enlightening, fun, whatever you want to call it, right? I hope you're having a wonderful day on your end. It seems to be a really pretty day here, but it's cold, very cold here in the Atlanta area. Have a wonderful week. This is the beginning of my week, and this is a holiday, by the way. But for all of you out there, no matter what time of day or night it is, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. I love you guys. Thank you for your time from the bottom of my heart. And hopefully I will see you again in the next video. Ciao for now.